Where do we see the real value for our customers? What should we be doubling down on? Where should we be moving away? And how do we curate people's entry into this new asset class in a way that's safe, controlled, and exposed people to the risk responsibly?
And they were the words of Alwyn Jones, CFO of Luno, a crypto exchange that's setting new standards for transparency, security, and consumer experience. But what really interested me, and the big reason I invited Alwyn onto the podcast today, is he comes with more than 2 decades of experience in traditional financial services, making him an indispensable voice in navigating the crypto world with the wisdom of the old and the vision of the new. And from the evolution of the CFO role in the tech-first world to the tangible benefits of adopting crypto payments for businesses, this conversation promises to go beyond the buzzwords. And today I want to dig deep into how the crypto industry is maturing and the reasons why it's attracting seasoned financial experts like Alwyn and what this means for the future. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to beam your ears directly to the UK, where you can join me and Alwyn Jones, CFO of Luno, in conversation about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi Neil, it's great to be here. So I'm Alwyn Jones. I'm the Group CFO of Luno, one of the leading crypto exchanges. We're active in 40 countries globally. Before that, I was CFO of Monzo, the UK app-based bank. I started my career in iBanking and consulting. So I've been a self-confessed financial services geek for 20 years. When I'm not geeking out about that, I am at home with my wife, 2 daughters, a grumpy cat, and a dog that definitely has ADHD.
Love it. And I'm curious, there's got to be a story there, right? Because it's not too often you hear people going from traditional finance to embracing the world of crypto. It's usually the opposite. And is there a story behind that transition?
There's many stories. So as I said, I've been a financial services geek, but my career has been one slow, long descent into innovation and disruption. So I spent quite a large part of my career at Barclays, where I ran consumer lending business, and we digitized that business. So it became the largest digital lender in the UK. And that's where I saw the power of technology to completely transform industries and disrupt what was going on. A trend which continued at Monzo, and crypto is the next evolution of that. It's very new. And there's an explosion of creativity going on in the area, which is very exciting to be a very small part of.
Incredibly cool what you're doing here. And I know as a podcast host that speaks about this on a regular basis, I often feel like a heretic when I talk about this exciting space. Did you get that from your colleagues, or do they now get it now that they're seeing things come together?
In part. So I definitely had I was surprised you're going there. And I think the main sort of driver of attraction was actually in traditional banking, a lot of the regulation is pretty much done, right? You're working through how does that apply in this new environment, and working with regulators to shape how they think about the business. In this space, we don't even know what a lot of this technology can do yet. In fact, a fair amount of what it will do will probably be fairly useless, right? We just don't know. And that's an incredibly wide space where I could play actually a lot more of my skills in terms of my background and understanding of regulation and banking and financial services in a completely new field. So that was part of the attraction, actually. It's been an education, and I definitely decided to join just before a major crypto winter also coincided with the macroeconomic downturn. So that's been an education in and of itself. But that was the main sort of driver. I think some of them are there, some of them are not. I'm sort of midway myself in that journey as well, right? I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, complete crypto convert. Equally, I see the benefit of all this technology and where it can go, and that's incredibly exciting for consumers and the institutions worldwide.
And of course, we've all seen the financial cycles and crypto, those worlds colliding, and you yourself have witnessed 50% asset reductions in the financial sector several times before. So none of this stuff is new to you. So can you elaborate on these kind of patterns that you've noticed whenever a new asset class emerges, and how this historical context might better inform your approach to managing crypto assets at Luno too?
So the thing that's amazing about this is actually the failures to learn from history. So there's nothing new about this. If you go back to Charles Mackay, The Extraordinary Popular Delusions, Tulip Mania, railways, even the mass expansion of equities and bond offerings after the First World War, and the emergence of a consumer investment class, right? If you read Kenneth Galbraith, people selling stocks on the street with no regulation and no background and no guarantee to the consumer they're actually getting what they're expecting to get. So this is a very human thing. And speculation that comes off the back of that is also a very human thing. And part of the lessons you learn from that is, okay, where is your appetite for risk? How are you thinking about where risks may emerge? How are you doing so responsibly with your assets? And if you're lucky enough to be managing other people's, how are you thinking about it? And yes, regulation, right? So the common themes of this is, this time it's different. We can do this extraordinary new activity, be it putting the power of investment into consumers' hands with equity and stock market investment in the 1920s. And then we can make money as it. And then we can leverage that return. And it's all going to be great. And the thing people forget is actually we've learned a thing or two through 400 or 500 years of financial services and banking and regulation. And there's a reason we do things some of those ways. So innovate, fantastic. Don't let it get away from you, and don't let it get away from you in terms of your risk management. And that's where I think we see these shakeouts. So I think crypto is going to be one of those now. I think the entire banking sector went through one in 2008. Internet companies went through it in 2000. Before these industries mature, emerge, they typically go through these destructive cycles. And part of the reason for that is that people fund bad projects and they don't kill them quickly enough. And that's how we are starting thinking about things at Luno as well, right? Where do we see the real value for our customers? What should we be doubling down on? Where should we be moving away? And how do we curate people's entry into this new asset class in a way that's safe, controlled, and expose people to the risk responsibly? And that's where we've positioned the company from day one, and was part of the reason I joined the business.
And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I was reading that you characterize yourself as a value-driving CFO as opposed to a traditional numbers-focused CFO. So can you tell me more about how this role is becoming increasingly vital in today's volatile and rapidly evolving business environments, but particularly in the crypto sector, from what you're saying here?
Yeah, I'm an accidental CFO. I didn't start off that way, and I didn't come from a traditional accounting background. And actually, the CFO role, I see it growing an awful lot, simply because, firstly, it's enterprise-based. You are, with the CEO, the most broad-based view of the business because everything shows up in the numbers. And you fulfill different roles in that, and different CFOs have different spikes. That's not good or bad, actually. It depends what's actually necessary for the business. It starts with being the guardian of the numbers and financial control and operational excellence. Those are your foundations. But very quickly, you build off those into change management. So are projects having the return you expect? Are you deploying capital effectively to grow the business? And all of that plays together into strategy. And that's more important in the fintech space and doubly important in crypto because everything is so uncertain. So you are the challenging foil to the board and the CEO to say, right, does the strategy make financial sense? Are we seeing response from customers and the market that we want? Are you seeing the returns that you want? Is it actually having the impact that we need? And helping shape that helps the business respond more effectively to volatility and rapidly evolving business environments. But that spike is becoming more and more important because although you build off a firm foundation of understanding the numbers, you need to switch your focus much more from this is what the numbers are to this is what they mean and how do you make decisions for the business. The financial reporting and the finance team is effectively the nervous system of the organization, right? So your choice is, are you a dinosaur that's still trying to figure out if it's dead if the meteor hits its tail? Or are you more of a cheetah and rapidly responding to what's happening in front of you? And you can't do that if you're just backward looking. You need to be looking forward. And that's where CFOs are adding more and more value. So I don't think it's actually a contradiction. It's where people dial up and what the business needs at that point in time. But that's how I see the role evolving. And certainly when I talk to other CFOs, it's more about how do I get out of the day-to-day and into that space where I can see where the business is going and be an effective partner strategically to the CEO.
And I'm curious, with so many senior financial professionals such as yourself moving into the crypto industry, how do you think this influx of traditional financial wisdom is helping to shape the progression of the crypto space and increasing adoption and all those wonderful things? Is there anything you're seeing here too?
Yeah, I think it ties back to that lessons from history and what's been learned, right? So people with experience in financial services bring experience of how things work and how they're done. That may not be for the best, actually. It may be where they desperately want to change things, right? That was certainly our mission at Monzo, and I definitely found that. And all of my frustrations of working at a big bank were replaced with new problems, which were all great. But that's one aspect. And then regulation. So there's a strong streak of independence, focus on disruption in crypto as a whole, as an industry, right? There's the whole thing of, look, it's a very secure platform and the protocols release themselves. You don't need a lot of this. But I think the experience of the last year and a half has shown actually how some of those core fundamentals of risk management and economic analysis matter, right? If you look at the collapse of USD tariff, if you look at 3 Hours Capital, there are worrying echoes there in 2008 and the massive credit expansion. And actually, the impact of those Trumpterian destruction waves that come through the industry being heightened by leverage and not understanding where the exposures are. And that's been, I think, a big wake-up call, and why people like myself and people far more experienced in compliance and risk management are coming into the industry, because it's now a thing that's here to stay and it needs to grow up. And yeah, you can't regulate that, and it's the independence of the sector is something that people love, but it comes at a cost. And how do you manage that cost with the opportunities provided, I think, is the perspective that a lot of people can bring to the industry. So on one hand, it does look like people are going native and returning back, and this is turning the back on the innovation. But I think this is what you need to do to grow the industry responsibly, because not everything in financial services needs to be thrown away and starting again. That's not a rational way to continue in innovation. And so as that comes into play, I think we'll see more interplay between and across, and this will become an asset class just like any other, with its advantages and opportunities, but also its risks.
And you mentioned risk there, and I suspect for a lot of people listening, the crypto market will be known to them for its extreme volatility. So how does your experience in the financial services arm you with the tools to navigate this landscape effectively? Because it's not for the faint-hearted, is it, very often?
It's not, and in some ways it doesn't, actually. So if you think about most financial institutions, they're very stable by design and regulation, right? So you take a bank, you roll forward its balance sheet, there is 95% of your income statement, you know what you're going to do. And the fights and the strategic wiggle room is all about the 5% additional investment. In crypto, you're dealing with an industry where revenue can fluctuate by 60, 70, 80% in a year. And that puts a very different demand on how you as a CFO manage the business. And in some ways, I wasn't ready for it, right? It's something that you're learning because the industry is learning as it goes. But the way I think about this is it really takes a lot of best practice that you've seen in other industries. So scenario planning, downside analysis, thinking through risks and how they might crystallize and what that would mean, and just takes that practice to new levels. So it makes discipline more important, and that actually makes the CFO role more challenging, because I've seen this now a few times where you're in a fintech and everything is going amazingly well and VCs are throwing money at you, and you can do many different things because you've now emerged from that space where there's just one thing that keeps the company alive. And that's where you can lose focus, and hauling that back and saying, let's not expand headcount, let's make sure we're investing in the most important opportunities. It's very difficult in that environment. And in crypto, it's even worse, because if you're in a bull market and you're seeing 100% returns and massive increases in revenue, it's very hard then to not invest and end up being overextended. And so that discipline which exists in banking, exists in insurance, exists in fintech more generally, becomes even more important in a business like a crypto business. And that's a challenge because it's hard to be the naysayer sometimes.
And I was also reading about your belief that beyond consumer demand, you mentioned that adopting crypto as a payment method can actually provide businesses with increased security and privacy. So can you expand on that and maybe also discuss on some of the other potential advantages or even drawbacks that you're seeing here for businesses? Because I think attracting more businesses into this space, increasing adoption, that's almost the missing piece of the jigsaw, isn't it?
Yes. And to some extent, we don't know exactly how or when that will happen, but there are a number of advantages for crypto payments as a whole. And firstly, it's instant. It can be much lower cost, and we've all seen that what happens when you take the cost out of a transaction, be it removing the bank teller or faster payments in more traditional financial settings. And actually, with increased security and privacy, right? So I know crypto has a little bit of a reputation of, okay, this is where the criminals hang out, right? And this is where money laundering happens, everything else. Actually, the worst place you can possibly commit any kind of financial crime is on a blockchain, simply because the ledger is distributed, everyone can see everything, and everything is completely traceable. There's no real way to hide your tracks. The challenge is actually the on-ramps to that ecosystem. So the security of the whole system is only as good as the gatekeepers. And actually, if you then breach that, that's where all of those advantages can work to your disadvantage because everything happens very quickly and that can magnify the issues. So part of what we do is focusing a lot on security of the on-ramp, customer validation, being very responsible at where money is coming from. And we don't always get that right, but controlling that entry point then means you can reap the benefit. And businesses have the same aspect, right? If they're moving large amounts of money, they obviously need it to be secure. They need it to be traceable, but actually they can move much faster. And with the evolution of smart contracts, you can settle much more quickly. You can instantly pay for things. You can move your business much more rapidly. And I think some of those use cases will be absolutely critical to driving institutional adoption. But we don't know yet how that's going to work through. So it's definitely something I think CFOs need to be looking at. Definitely something they need to be thinking about from a treasury point of view. But we're going to actually define those use cases together as an industry, and it's not completely clear-cut yet where those are going to come out.
And given that CFOs are now expected to be more than just financial overseers, I'm curious, how do you personally incorporate a strategic vision into your current role at Luno? Are there any specific opportunities that you might be eyeing for the company? I appreciate you probably can't share too much, but is there anything you can?
It's actually been quite interesting to see how much of the strategy consulting toolkit that I learned at Bain can come straight to the fore in this. It's all still very highly relevant. And this is also true of my MBA. So thinking about a business in that very structured way of what drives revenue, what drives costs, how does sort of the core business look like in its full potential, and then what adjacencies can you expand to? So how do you take the capabilities of the core business and expand into either new markets or new products or new use cases? All of that is bread and butter and absolutely critical to the role. And that informs sort of the annual planning cycle, but also where are we allocating resources internally? So I'm sure you've heard of the 70-20-10 sort of 3 horizons of focus that Google came up with. I mean, there's no magic about those particular numbers. It just says this is where you're allocating your time. But thinking through this year, okay, where are we spending this? And are we putting 70% of our time on the core business? Great. But where are we spending those 20-10? And so for Luno, that is things like thinking about remittance cases and not just get onto the platform, buy crypto and hold it. Thinking about underpinning infrastructure aspects like how do we do local custody and how do we think about groups of reserves and making sure that people can see stuff is in their on the platform in their account in the way that they expect, but also working with high net worth individuals, businesses, and expanding into that sort of space. There's potential opportunities across the board there, and we're obviously going to double down where we see real opportunity for the business globally. Geographic expansion is also a natural point, but I'm not giving any too much of our secrets because obviously I'd like to get there first.
Excellent. And as crypto continues to mature, how do you anticipate the role of regulatory bodies evolving, and how is Luno preparing for these potential changes? Because again, it feels like that's the next step, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, right, regulation is essential for the business to grow, right? And it's such a challenge for regulators and the industry as well. So I think if I can characterize probably at a high level what you see is, first off, this is not a thing, it's not going to happen. Oh, now it is a thing, now we need to regulate it. What is it? Is it a currency? Is it an exchange? Is it an asset? Is it a security? And we're seeing some of those fights play out across the US right now, and different regulators having different views. And so guiding through that challenge and working with regulators, which is what we've done in countries like Malaysia and South Africa, to help them frame their thinking and get to a better outcome both for them and the industry. Luno's been baking in regulation from day one. We think this is going to be a regulated industry. It should be. We're dealing with people's money and wealth and their financial prospects. So we absolutely welcome it. But it does need to reflect the individual nuances of what's different about crypto, what it enables people to do, both in terms of the risks that it presents and the opportunities for consumers. So we're very pro it. I think the regulators in different markets are in various stages of getting to grips with these challenges. But we are seeing a much more stable regulatory environment and the path forward appearing in most markets. That's a very good thing to see because that will increase confidence and allow people to invest more of their hard-earned wealth into this sector and potentially benefit. And that needs to be done in a safe way. And so we're all behind that.
And I hate to mention the P word, but the pandemic was a huge catalyst for numerous changes in the financial world and, in fact, the world at large. But how has that affected your strategy at Luno? And are there any long-term impacts? And do you foresee anything else or any other impacts it having on the crypto industry at large? What are you seeing here?
I think globally, it just changed people's investment behavior and expectations about the future, right? So if you'd have told me 4 years ago that we'd all be sat at home for 2 years and London would be dead and you wouldn't be able to go out anywhere and the economy would still keep going, I wouldn't have believed you, right? This was beyond any kind of scenario planning that anyone had done. And it happened very quickly, right? In Monzo, we saw a significant amount of revenue disappear simply because we were making lots of our money from transactions and people doing things and traveling. So that was a challenge. And so I think what's really sort of influenced people is, okay, life is for living a little bit. So how do I make sure I'm balancing here and now and future in the right way whilst I still can do things? But also, do I have complete trust in systems and everything that I take for granted, right? And we see this particularly in emerging markets. It's, right, what is my counterweight to my local currency? And how do I get US dollar exposure if I want that in the right way? And do I have a secure means of payment that's not dependent on the existing ecosystem? So I think it's opened people's minds to that and it created a lot more freedom about what people are potentially willing to accept and think about from a risk profile. So that creativity, I think, is something that we can actually take as a benefit from that enforced exile. More mundanely at Luno, we've always been a very hybrid-friendly company. Our philosophy is remote but reachable. So most of my team are based in South Africa. I do a lot of my business on Zoom or Hangout. And we've definitely kept that. So although a lot of businesses are now starting to crack the whip and force people back into the office a little bit, we actually see Lunos really value the flexibility and the ability to work on their terms, and it's enabling us to retain people who perhaps we wouldn't have been if we hadn't been able to do that. So I think for us, it's really validated that approach to technology-led communication, but also realize we can run the business that way. And this is a permanent part of how we work now and not something that is a temporary short-term fix. So I think that's been a hugely beneficial change just internally to the company. And there are challenges with managing that, but we work through those as you'd expect.
Well, it's a huge pleasure talking with you today, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to share your insights and your expertise with everyone listening. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave one final gift, or maybe even two or more, and that is, I always ask my guests to leave a book that has inspired them that we can add to our Amazon wish list, or a song that we can add to our Spotify playlist. All I'm going to ask is, what would you like to leave everyone listening with today, and why?
Well, I'm always very greedy on these things, because I do always say I'd be the worst possible guest on Desert Island Disc, because I can't possibly distill everything down. The books, I think personally, Seneca's Letters from a Stoic is fantastic. Clive Woodward's Winning, I hate to say it as a Welsh rugby fan, but it's a great book about business, as well about winning the World Cup and his mindset and approach to it. So I really like that one, and I bought that one for a few people. And then song, look, there's too many to name, but the one that came to mind this morning was actually John Farnham, You're the Voice, which I loved when I was in my teens, and it's a really optimistic ode to the ability to the individual to make a difference. So I'll leave that for your Spotify playlist. I've checked, it's there, you can find it.
Awesome, I'll get that added straight away. And the book, you've got to give me You're the Voice earworm now for the rest of the day. I've got it playing in my head already.
Well, that's done before a little bit in Australia with using it for the referendum there. I loved it when it first came out. So it's been a pleasant reminder.
And for anyone listening who would like to find out more information about Luno, explore some of the topics we talked about today, or even connect with yourself or ask your team a question, what's the best starting point for everything? Where would you like to point everyone listening?
So obviously our website, there's a lot of educational material on crypto.com. Download the app. You don't have to invest, but there's a lot of educational content there. I'm on LinkedIn, also Twitter. Alwyn H. Jones, it's very easy to find me. And obviously most of the team are there as well. So those are the best places.
Fantastic. Well, I think for any business leader looking to adopt crypto, I think we've learned a lot today around the benefits of offering crypto as a payment method. They're not just limited to satisfying consumer demand. They're also able to exploit the increased security and privacy protocols inherent in blockchain technology. We covered so much in a short amount of time, and even managed to squeeze in that classic John Farnham track. But more than anything, just thank you for joining me today.
No, it's been a pleasure, Neil. Thank you for having me.
So a big thank you to Alwyn Jones for joining us today, offering an enriched perspective on the changing role of the CFO and the opportunities and challenges that come with crypto adoption in businesses. And one key takeaway for me was how vital it is for CFOs to evolve from being mere financial historians to strategic visionaries. And I think his own personal journey from the traditional financial world to the crypto space just exemplifies the transformative role. Now, as always, we aim to bring discussions that open up new avenues of thought and actionable insights. And we've had a simple conversation together, a 30-minute chat, and I want to bring you into this conversation. So if you do have any extra comments or you'd like to join me on the podcast, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. But that's it for today. So I'm signing off until the next episode, which will be tomorrow, where once again we'll try and demystify the complex world of technology. And hopefully you'll join me again. But as for today, just thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.